The great crystal spires of Harmony Station trembled as another star system died. High Counselor Veiltar watched the displays with growing horror. The Void Swarm had consumed the singing worlds in just 3 standard cycles. Entire civilizations reduced to silent darkness. How many does that make? Veiltar asked, her crystalline voice creating soft musical notes in the chamber air. 47 systems in the last rotation, replied Data Singer Hummel, a gaseous being whose form shifted with distress. The swarm moves faster than our evacuation fleets. We cannot save them all. Around the circular chamber, representatives from across the Galactic Federation displayed their fear in ways unique to their species. The melody folk songs turned to minor keys. The plant-like gardeners wilted visibly. The geometric architects created nervous fractals in the air. The Federation had known peace for over 2,000 years. Their weapons were ceremonial. Their military existed only in theoretical documents. War was something from the dark times before civilization, before the great unity that brought all sapient species together in harmony. What news from the Centauri Defense Fleet? Veiltar asked. Hummel's gaseous form darkened. They ran. Admiral Soft Branch ordered full retreat after the first encounter. The swarm destroyed 3 of our finest ships in minutes. The chamber fell silent except for the quiet humming of life support systems. The Federation's greatest warships were works of art, built for exploration and scientific research. They had shield generators, yes, but only to protect against cosmic radiation. They had weapons, but only mining lasers and asteroid deflectors. Against the Void Swarm, they were as helpless as children. The evacuation of the core worlds has begun, announced Root Speaker Oakland, one of the Gardener representatives. Her voice was like wind through leaves, but now those leaves sounded dry and brittle. But where can we run? The swarm spreads in all directions. They consume everything in their path. Veiltar turned to the great star map at the center of the chamber. Red zones marked swarm-controlled space spreading like a disease across the galaxy. Yellow zones showed evacuation areas. Green zones, safe space, grew smaller each day. We need help, she said quietly. We need warriors. We need those who understand violence. The chamber erupted in concerned sounds. Musical discord from the melody folk. Geometric chaos from the architects. The very idea violated everything the Federation stood for. There are no warriors left in the galaxy, pointed out Hummel. We made sure of that. The warrior species were all contained or reformed centuries ago. Not all of them, said a small voice from the back of the chamber. Everyone turned. Junior Archivist Pipsy, barely past her first molting, stood nervously among the senior counselors. She was a chirper, one of the small bird-like species that served as the Federation's record keepers. Speak, young one, Veiltar encouraged. Pipsy's feathers ruffled with nervousness. The quarantine files. From the old archives. There was a species we quarantined instead of reforming. Too dangerous to approach, the record said. Too violent to civilize. Which species? Demanded several counselors at once. Humans, Pipsy whispered. From the planet called Earth, classified as a Class 13 death world. The species was marked as impossibly aggressive and unsuitable for civilized contact. A shocked silence filled the chamber. Death worlds were legendary, planets so hostile that they were considered uninhabitable. Class 13 was the highest rating. Nothing that evolved on such a world could possibly be civilized. The records, Veiltar said slowly. What do they say about these humans? Pipsy consulted her datapad with trembling claws. Bipedal predators. Pack hunters. They evolved from persistence hunters who could chase prey for days without stopping. They fight constantly, even among themselves. They have something called wars where millions die for abstract concepts. They worship violence and death. Monsters, breathed Oakland. Perhaps, said Veiltar. But what if monsters are what we need? The debate that followed lasted for 6 hours. Some counselors argued that contacting such creatures would damn them all. Others pointed out they were already damned. The Void Swarm showed no mercy, took no prisoners, and left nothing alive behind them. In the end, desperation won. We will send a message, Veiltar announced. A plea for help. If these humans are truly as violent as the records claim, perhaps they will know how to fight what we cannot. And if they decide to destroy us instead of help us, asked Hummel. Then we die by the hand of another monster instead of the swarm, Veiltar replied. At least we will have tried. The message took 3 days to compose. It had to be translated into hundreds of languages and transmitted on every frequency imaginable. No one knew if the humans even had radio technology, or if they had advanced beyond it entirely. "People of Earth," the message began, "we are the Galactic Federation, representatives of 437 peaceful worlds. We cry out across the void for heroes to save us from an evil that consumes all life. We face extinction from an enemy we cannot fight. We are gardeners and artists, singers and builders. We are not warriors. We do not know war. If any among you have the strength to stand against the darkness, if any among you know the ways of battle, we beg you to answer our call. The galaxy is dying. We need heroes. Will you help us?" The message was sent toward the small yellow star that held the quarantined Deathworld. Now all they could do was wait, and hope that the monsters they called would be the kind that fought other monsters. 3 days later, as the Federation fleet retreated from yet another lost system, sensors detected something impossible. Ships were approaching from the direction of the quarantine zone, crude metal vessels that moved by chemical propulsion, primitive and ugly compared to Federation designs. But they were coming. The Deathworlders had heard their call. Veiltar stared at the approaching ships on her display screen. They looked like weapons themselves, all hard angles and brutal efficiency. "No grace, no beauty, just function. What have we done?" she whispered. But as another Federation world fell silent on the communication networks, she knew they had no choice. They had cried out for heroes and something had answered. Admiral Sarah Chen stepped off the shuttle ramp and immediately noticed 3 things. First, the gravity on Harmony Station was too light, making each step feel like a bounce. Second, the air smelled like flowers mixed with ozone. Third, every alien in sight was backing away from her. She couldn't blame them. Even in her dress uniform, she probably looked like a walking nightmare to these creatures. The humans had learned about Federation physiology during the 3-day journey to their capital station. Most Federation species were fragile by human standards. Some were made of crystal. Others were basically intelligent gas clouds. Many had never seen a natural predator, let alone been one. "Admiral Chen," came a voice like wind chimes. "I am High Counselor Veiltar. Thank you for coming." Sarah looked down at the crystalline being. Veiltar was beautiful in an alien way, like a living sculpture of blue-green crystal that caught and reflected light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. She was also clearly terrified. "Counselor," Sarah nodded. "We received your message. We came as soon as we could." Behind Sarah, her honor guard of 6 Marines stood at attention. They had removed their armor for this meeting, but even in simple fatigues they radiated controlled violence. Lieutenant Morrison, her aide, carried a briefcase containing information about human military capabilities. Colonel Reeves, her security chief, kept scanning for threats out of pure habit. The Federation representatives were trying very hard not to stare, but failing. Sarah understood why. Humans were the first bipedal predators most of them had ever seen. They had forward-facing eyes, obvious muscle definition, and moved with a predator's economy of motion. "Perhaps we should proceed to the briefing chamber," Veiltar suggested, her musical voice showing strain. As they walked through the station corridors, Sarah marveled at the architecture. Everything was curves and flowing lines like the inside of a seashell. Art was everywhere, integrated into the very walls. It was beautiful and peaceful and absolutely defenseless. The briefing chamber was a disaster of nervous energy. Gaseous beings swirled with agitation. Plant creatures drooped with stress. The bird-like chirpers huddled together and made quiet distress sounds. "Show them the tactical data," Veiltar said to someone Sarah couldn't see clearly. The center of the room lit up with a 3-dimensional star map. Red zones spread like bloodstains across what should have been friendly space. Sarah studied it with a professional eye while the Federation representatives explained their situation. "The Void Swarm appeared 18 months ago," explained Data Singer Hummel, his gaseous form cycling through worried colors. "They consume all organic matter in a system, then move to the next. We estimate their total fleet strength at over 10,000 vessels." "What's their technology level?" asked Colonel Reeves. "Unknown. Their ships seem to be grown rather than built. They regenerate damage quickly. Our weapons barely scratch them." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "What weapons do you have?" There was an embarrassed silence. "Mineral extraction lasers," admitted someone. "Asteroid deflector shields. Exploration drones." "You don't have any military technology," Sarah said. It wasn't a question. We We have been peaceful for over 2,000 years, Veiltar said defensively. We saw no need for weapons of war. Sarah exchanged glances with her officers. They had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed was still shocking. These people had built an entire galactic civilization without armies, without weapons, without any preparation for war. What about your ships? Lieutenant Morrison asked. How are they armed? They're not, said a new voice. Admiral Softbranch, one of the plant-like gardeners, rustled his leaves nervously. Our vessels are designed for scientific research and peaceful exploration. We have mining equipment and industrial fabricators, but no weapons. Show us a battle recording, Sarah requested. The hologram shifted to show a recent engagement. Sarah watched as elegant Federation ships faced off against dark, organic-looking vessels that moved like living things. The Federation ships fired bright beams that splashed harmlessly against enemy hulls. The swarm ships responded with weapons that seemed to eat through Federation shields and armor. The Federation ships ran. All of them. Not a fighting retreat, not a tactical withdrawal. They simply turned and fled at maximum speed. I see the problem, Sarah said quietly. What problem? Asked Veiltar. You don't know how to fight, the chamber erupted in offended sounds. Musical discord, rustling leaves, angry geometric patterns in the air. We are a peaceful civilization, protested Oakland. We believe in harmony and understanding. And that's wonderful, Sarah said calmly. But the Void Swarm doesn't care about your beliefs. They care about eating you. She stood and walked to the star map, pointing at the advancing red zones. Look at their pattern. They're not just consuming random systems. They're cutting your supply lines, isolating your worlds, preventing you from coordinating a defense. This is strategic thinking, military thinking. You sound like you admire them, accused Humamel. I respect any enemy smart enough to plan their attacks, Sarah replied. But that also means they can be beaten. Any strategy can be countered if you understand it. How? Asked Veiltar. Sarah smiled, and several aliens flinched at the sight. They had never seen a predator's smile before. You fight back. Really fight back. Not with mining lasers and evacuation plans, with weapons designed to kill, with ships built for war, with tactics meant to destroy the enemy completely. We don't know how to do any of those things, whispered Pipsy. We do, Sarah said simply. She nodded to Lieutenant Morrison, who opened his briefcase and activated a portable holographic projector. The image that appeared made several Federation representatives gasp in horror. It was a human warship. The UES Nemesis, a dreadnought-class vessel designed for one purpose, destroying other ships, bristling with weapons, armored like a fortress, moving through space like a predator stalking prey. This is what a warship looks like, Sarah explained. Every system is designed for battle. The armor can withstand nuclear weapons. The guns can crack a moon. The crew is trained from childhood for war. It's horrible, breathed Oakland. It's necessary, Sarah replied. Because sometimes horrible people exist, and the only way to stop them is with greater violence. She changed the image to show human Marines in combat armor. These are soldiers, warriors. They train constantly for battle. They study war like you study art. They live to fight and die to protect others. The chamber fell silent except for the quiet sounds of distressed aliens. Are you offering to fight for us? Veiltar asked finally. We're offering to teach you to fight for yourselves, Sarah corrected. And yes, we'll fight alongside you. Because despite what your records say about us, we don't make war on innocents. We make war on those who prey on innocence. What do you want in return? Asked Hummel suspiciously. Sarah looked around the chamber at all the frightened faces. These people had built something beautiful. A galaxy-spanning civilization based on peace and cooperation. It was everything humanity had ever dreamed of achieving. Help us become better than we are, she said quietly. We know war. We know violence. We're very good at both. But you know peace. You know how to build instead of destroy. Maybe together we can find something better than either of us could manage alone. Veiltar was quiet for a long moment, her crystalline form cycling through different colors as she thought. The Void Swarm will reach the Melody Worlds in 6 days, she said finally. If we're going to make a stand, it should be there. Those people, they create the most beautiful music in the galaxy. They shouldn't die in silence, Sarah nodded. Then that's where we fight. But we do this properly. No half measures. No holding back. War isn't noble or clean or fair. It's about winning, period. And if we win, asked Veiltar, then we save the galaxy, Sarah replied. and maybe learn that monsters aren't always evil. Sometimes they're just what you need when the real evil shows up. As the meeting broke up and plans began for the defense of the Melody Worlds, Sarah couldn't help but notice that the aliens were no longer backing away from her. They were still afraid, but it was a different kind of fear now. Not fear of her, fear of what was coming, and hope that maybe, just maybe, the monsters from Earth were the right kind of monsters for the job. The Melody Worlds were dying. From the bridge of the UES Nemesis, Admiral Sarah Chen watched the Void Swarm's advanced scouts tear through the outer system. The 3 planets that made up this system were home to the Singers, a species that communicated entirely through complex musical harmonies. Their cities were vast concert halls. Their technology was based on sound waves and resonance. It was all about to be silenced forever. Federation fleet is maintaining position at the edge of the system, reported Commander Williams from the sensor station. 18 ships, all keeping well back from the fighting. Sarah wasn't surprised. She had spent the last 6 days trying to teach Federation officers basic military tactics. It was like teaching fish to fly. They understood the theory, but their every instinct screamed against violence. Human fleet status? She asked. All 12 ships ready for engagement, Williams replied. The Marines are loaded and eager, Sarah smiled grimly. 12 ships against over 100 swarm vessels. By any reasonable calculation, they were massively outnumbered. But humans had never been reasonable when it came to protecting innocent people. Admiral, came a musical voice over the comm. This is Song Leader Brightnote from the surface. Our evacuation is only half complete. Can you give us more time? Sarah looked at the tactical display. The swarm scouts were already past the outer planets, heading for the inhabited worlds. The main fleet would arrive in less than 3 hours. We'll give you what time we can, she promised. Thank you, Brightnote sang, his voice carrying harmonics of gratitude and fear. If we die today, at least it will not be in silence. Sarah closed the channel and turned to her crew. You heard him. We're buying time for civilians. That means we engage the scouts now. Full commitment. Ma'am, interrupted the communications officer. Admiral Softbranch is requesting to speak with you. The Federation Admiral appeared on screen, his bark-like face creased with worry. Admiral Chen, surely you're not planning to engage. You're outnumbered 8-1. 9-1, actually, Sarah corrected. I can count. Then you know this is suicide. No, Sarah said calmly. This is war. There's a difference. She cut the transmission and opened a channel to the human fleet. All ships, this is Chen. We're going in. Remember, these people have never seen real warriors before. Let's show them what Earth brings to the galaxy. The response was immediate. 12 human warships accelerated toward the advancing swarm scouts. The UES Nemesis led the charge, her nuclear pulse engines leaving a trail of fire across space. The Federation observers watched in horror as the tiny human fleet rushed toward certain destruction. This wasn't tactics. This wasn't strategy. This was madness. Then the first shots were fired. The lead swarm vessel, a thing like a giant spaceborne leech, opened fire with bioplasma cannons. Streams of organic fire reached out toward the human ships. The Federation had seen these weapons before. They melted through their shields like acid. The human ships didn't even try to dodge. Instead, they returned fire with weapons the Federation had never seen before. Nuclear-tipped missiles that exploded in brilliant flashes, particle beams that cut through swarm armor like knives, railguns that fired solid tungsten slugs at relativistic speeds. The lead swarm vessel simply disintegrated. Impossible, breathed Admiral Softbranch, watching from his command ship. How did they... Different philosophy, explained Dr. Willowbranch, the ship's xenospecialist. We build our ships to survive. They build theirs to kill. The human fleet tore through the scout formation like wolves among sheep. Where Federation ships would have retreated after the first casualty, the humans pressed their attack. Where Federation commanders would have tried to negotiate, the humans simply destroyed everything that shot at them. But numbers began to tell. More swarm ships poured into the system. The humans were taking damage now, their shields flaring under concentrated fire. Admiral, reported Commander Williams, the Retribution has lost main power. The Marathon is venting atmosphere. Sarah nodded. She had expected this. Signal the fleet. Prepare for boarding actions. Boarding actions? Williams stared at her. Ma'am, their ships are organic. We don't know if we can even breathe their atmosphere. Then we'll hold our breath, Sarah replied. Marines prepare for assault. What happened next would be talked about in Federation space for generations. Instead of retreating when their ships were damaged, the humans did something unthinkable. They rammed their crippled vessels into swarm ships and sent boarding parties across in armored suits. From the Federation observation ships, Admiral Softbranch watched human soldiers cut their way into alien vessels with cutting tools and explosives. They fought in the corridors of living ships, battling creatures that had never encountered individual opponents before. The swarm had evolved as a hive mind. Every unit was part of a greater whole, acting in perfect coordination. But they had never faced enemies who thought independently, who could adapt and improvise in real time. The humans were chaos incarnate in their ordered existence. "How are they surviving in there?" asked Dr. Willowbranch. The answer came from intercepted human communications. The boarding parties were fighting in environments that would kill most Federation species instantly. Toxic atmospheres crushing gravity, temperatures that would boil water. They did it in powered armor, breathing bottled air, and when their equipment failed, they kept fighting anyway. "Sergeant Morrison to Nemesis," came a voice over the radio. "We've reached the bridge of this thing. It's like the inside of a giant stomach. Also, I think it's trying to digest my armor. Can you take it?" asked Sarah. "Already done, ma'am. Turns out these things don't like having their central nervous system shot full of holes." The swarm ship Morrison's team had boarded went dark, drifting powerless. Then another. Then another. In less than 2 hours, the human fleet had done what the Federation military couldn't do in 18 months. They had stopped a swarm advance cold, but it wasn't the victory that shocked the Federation observers. It was what came after. As the last swarm scout was destroyed, song leader Brightnote's voice filled the communication channels. He was singing. Not words, but pure music, complex harmonies that spoke of gratitude and wonder and hope. Other singers joined in from the surface, then from the other melody worlds. Soon the entire system resonated with a song of thanksgiving, a musical celebration of survival, and from the human ships came something equally unexpected. Laughter, human voices, rough and crude compared to the singers' perfect harmonies, but filled with joy and relief. The Deathworlders were laughing with pure happiness at having saved innocent lives. "They're not monsters," whispered Dr. Willowbranch. Admiral Softbranch was silent for a long moment, watching the human ships as they began rescue operations for their own wounded. "No," he said finally. "They're something much more dangerous than monsters." "What's that?" "Heroes." As the main swarm fleet approached the system edge, they found something they had never encountered before. Resistance. Not the panicked flight of prey animals, but the coordinated defense of predators protecting their territory. The humans had taught the Federation their first lesson in war. Sometimes, the only way to protect what you love is to destroy what threatens it. And sometimes, the best way to teach that lesson is to show that even monsters can choose to be protectors. The Song of the Melody Worlds continued for 3 days, a celebration of life preserved and hope renewed. When it finally ended, it was replaced by something even more remarkable. Silence. Not the silence of death, but the silence of a galaxy listening to the sound of war drums in the distance, listening to the approaching thunder of an enemy that had never faced real warriors before. Listening to the promise that when the darkness came again, it would find more than victims waiting. It would find Earth's children, standing ready, and this time they would not be alone. 6 months after the Battle of the Melody Worlds, the galaxy was learning to make war. Colonel Maria Santos walked through the training grounds on Harmony Station, watching alien species learn skills they had never imagined needing. A group of crystalline architects practiced building defensive fortifications, their geometric bodies creating perfect angles and interlocking fields of fire. Nearby, gaseous drifters worked on coordinated movement patterns, their flowing forms learning to scout and relay information like living radar networks. The transformation was remarkable and sometimes heartbreaking. "Colonel Santos," called a familiar voice. She turned to see Captain Brightnote, one of the singers who had survived the attack on the Melody Worlds. He now wore modified human armor and carried a sonic disruptor weapon designed around his species' natural abilities. "Captain," Maria nodded. The singer had insisted on the military rank after volunteering for the new integrated forces. "How's the training going?" "My squad can now coordinate sonic attacks to disable swarm bioships," he sang. his voice carrying notes of pride and sadness. "We have learned to make our music into weapons." "I'm not sure how I feel about that." Maria understood. The Federation species were struggling with concepts that went against everything they believed in. Teaching them to fight was like teaching humans to stop breathing. "War changes everyone," she said gently. "The question is whether it makes you stronger or breaks you." "And which has it done to you?" Maria considered the question as they walked toward the main briefing hall. "Both," she said finally. "War always does both." The briefing hall was packed with representatives from dozens of species, all wearing the new integrated fleet uniforms. Admiral Chen stood at the front, pointing to a holographic display of the galaxy. "The Void Swarm has changed tactics," she announced. "After their losses at the Melody Worlds, they've become more cautious. They're no longer making direct assaults on defended systems." The display shifted to show swarm movements over the past month. Instead of straight-line advances, the enemy was making circular approaches, probing for weak points, avoiding systems with human fleet presence. "They're learning," observed General Barkstrong, a gardener who had taken to military strategy with surprising aptitude. "Adapting to our new defensive posture." "Exactly," Sarah nodded. "Which means we need to adapt too. Defense isn't enough anymore. We need to take the fight to them." A murmur of concern rippled through the assembled officers. Many of them were still uncomfortable with the idea of aggressive action. "Admiral," said Commander Hummel, his gaseous form cycling through worried colors, "surely you don't mean offensive operations? We've made such progress in defensive coordination." "Defense wins battles," Sarah replied. "Offense wins wars." The swarm is regrouping at the edge of the galaxy, building up their forces. "If we give them time, they'll come back stronger than before." She changed the display to show deep space sensor readings. "Long-range scouts have identified what appears to be a swarm nursery system. If we can destroy it, we can cripple their ability to replace losses." The room fell silent. What Sarah was proposing went against every Federation instinct. It wasn't defense of innocent worlds. It was seeking out the enemy to destroy them. "How many ships would this require?" asked Admiral Softbranch. "Everything we have," Sarah said bluntly. "The entire combined fleet. Human warships, modified Federation vessels, and the new integrated crews. It's all or nothing." "And if we lose?" asked Dr. Willowbranch. "Then the galaxy falls anyway," Sarah replied. But slower. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Federation officers argued for continued defensive strategies. Human commanders pushed for immediate aggressive action. Newly trained alien warriors found themselves caught between their peaceful nature and their growing understanding of military necessity. Finally, High Counselor Veiltar spoke up. "I have a question for Admiral Chen," she said, her crystalline voice carrying harmonics of deep thought. "In your species' history, when faced with an enemy that threatened to destroy everything you held dear, what did your greatest leaders do?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, thinking of old Earth, of wars fought before humanity reached the stars. "They did whatever it took to win," she said finally, "even when it cost them everything they were fighting to protect. Even when it changed them into something they never wanted to become. And was it worth it?" "Ask me after the war," Sarah replied. The vote was close, but the offensive won approval. Within a week, the largest fleet in galactic history was assembled at the edge of Federation space. 60 human warships, 150 modified Federation vessels, and over 300,000 personnel from dozens of species. The journey to the swarm nursery system took 2 weeks at maximum sublight speed. During that time, the cultural exchange accelerated rapidly. Human Marines learned to coordinate with gaseous scouts who could infiltrate areas no solid being could reach. Federation engineers learned to build weapons that could function in the hostile environment of a death world. Alien commanders studied human tactical doctrine, while human officers learned to account for the unique abilities of their new allies. It wasn't always smooth. "These humans are insane," complained Engineer Crystal Song during one particularly intense training session. "They want us to build bombs that can crack a planet's crust." "Only if necessary," replied her human counterpart, Lieutenant Jackson. "Better to have the capability and not need it than need it and not have it. But the environmental damage won't matter if everyone's dead," Jackson said bluntly. Such conversations happened daily across the fleet. The Federation species were learning to think in terms of acceptable losses and collateral damage. Concepts that had been theoretical were becoming operational reality. The humans, meanwhile, were learning something equally difficult. They were discovering what it meant to fight not just for survival, but for something worth preserving. "You know what's strange?" asked Sergeant Torres as she worked with a squad of chirper scouts.
"Back on Earth, we fought for territory, for resources, for ideology.
Here, we're fighting for their right to keep singing." The tiny bird-like alien she was training looked up at her with large, intelligent eyes. "Is that not worth fighting for?" "Yeah," Torres smiled. "It really is." When the fleet finally reached the swarm nursery system, what they found defied expectation. The system contained 17 planets, all of them converted into massive biofactories. Swarm ships grew in orbital pods like fruit on trees. The planets themselves pulsed with organic life, their surfaces covered in structures that looked more like organs than buildings. "How many ships are we looking at?" asked Admiral Chen. "Sensors estimate over 5,000 vessels in various stages of completion," reported the science officer. "Plus defensive installations on every planet and moon. And we have 200 ships," muttered Colonel Reeves. "Odds of 25 to 1, added Captain Brightnote. In human tactical doctrine, these would be considered impossible odds. Sarah looked around the bridge at her mixed crew. Humans and aliens working side by side, all of them preparing for what might be their last battle. "Good thing we're not just human anymore," she said. The battle of the nursery system lasted 4 days and became legend. Federation ships used their advanced shields to protect human vessels during attack runs. Human Marines boarded biofactories to plant nuclear charges while alien specialists disabled swarm command networks. Gaseous drifters infiltrated swarm vessels to gather intelligence while crystal-based architects created geometric patterns in space that disrupted swarm coordination, but it was the moment when everything went wrong that defined the battle. On the 3rd day, Admiral Chen's flagship was surrounded and boarded by swarm creatures. The human crew fought desperately, but they were outnumbered and running out of ammunition. That's when Captain Brightnote did something unprecedented. He sang, not just him, but every singer in the fleet. Their voices joined across space in a harmony that had never existed before. It wasn't the peaceful music of the melody worlds. It was something new, something angry, something that spoke of loss and determination and the willingness to die for others. The song shattered the swarm's coordination. The bioships, dependent on neural networks that relied on specific frequencies, began attacking each other. The boarding parties collapsed as their hive-mind connection was severed. "What did you do?" asked Sarah as the swarm forces retreated in chaos. "We learned to make our music into more than just weapons," Brightnote replied. "We learned to make it into hope." The nursery system fell. 17 worlds of biofactories were reduced to lifeless rock. 5,000 swarm vessels were destroyed. The enemy's ability to replace losses was crippled for years to come, but the real victory wasn't tactical. As the combined fleet headed home, Admiral Chen received a message from the Federation Council. More species wanted to join the military. The peaceful gardeners were volunteering for combat engineering roles. The artistic melody folk were forming warsong brigades. Even the timid chirpers were asking to be trained as intelligence operatives. The galaxy was learning to fight. More importantly, it was learning that fighting didn't have to mean becoming monsters. Sometimes, it meant becoming heroes, and sometimes heroes came from the most unexpected places. Even from Deathworlds where monsters learned to sing lullabies to help children sleep safely through the night. The final battle began where it all started, at Terra Nova, humanity's first and most cherished colony world. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the UES Nemesis, watching the planet below. Terra Nova was everything Earth had dreamed of becoming. Clean oceans, pristine forests, cities that lived in harmony with nature. It was home to 3 million humans and their families. It was also directly in the path of the Void Swarm's last desperate assault. "They could have attacked anywhere," mused Colonel Reeves, joining her at the viewport. "Why here?" "Because they finally learned how to hurt us," Sarah replied. "They can't beat our ships, so they're going after what we care about most." The tactical display showed the approaching swarm fleet. Every surviving ship they had drawn from across the galaxy in one final gambit. Over 15,000 vessels, more than had ever been seen in one place before. "Fleet status?" Sarah asked. 400 ships in total, reported Commander Williams. 200 human vessels, 200 Federation ships plus support craft. Every captain who could get their ship spaceworthy is here. Sarah nodded. The response had been immediate when the swarm's target became clear. Ships had come from across the galaxy, not just military vessels but converted freighters, research ships, even civilian craft armed with mining equipment and crewed by volunteers. The planet itself was defended by more than just orbital stations. 3 months ago, the Federation Council had made an unprecedented decision. They had lifted the quarantine on Earth and invited human civilians to establish defensive positions throughout Federation space. What they got were families, human colonists who brought their children to safe worlds, then stayed to help build defenses. Engineers who designed planetary shield generators, farmers who grew food for mixed species crews, teachers who helped alien children learn about courage and sacrifice. They also got warriors. "Admiral," came a voice over the comm. "This is Planetary Defense Coordinator Jackson. We're ready down here." Sarah smiled. Jackson had been a Marine sergeant until he married a Federation botanist and decided to try peaceful life on Terra Nova. When the war started, he had volunteered to organize civilian defense forces. "What's your situation, Coordinator?" "Well, ma'am, we've got 30,000 human civilians who've decided they don't much like the idea of their kids being eaten by space monsters. We've also got about 100,000 Federation residents who've learned that sometimes gardeners need to know how to use weapons. The surface of Terra Nova was dotted with defensive installations, built in the combined architectural styles of a dozen species. Crystalline towers created by architects provided perfect fields of fire. Gardens designed by the gardener species concealed weapons emplacements. Even the Melody folk had contributed, creating sonic resonance points that could disorient attacking forces. "And the children?" Sarah asked. "Safe in the deep shelters, ma'am, though some of the human kids keep asking if they can help fight. I told them their job is to stay alive so we have something worth fighting for." As the swarm fleet drew closer, messages began coming in from across the galaxy. Federation worlds that had learned to fight were sending whatever ships they could. Some wouldn't arrive in time, but they were coming anyway. "Admiral Chen," came a musical voice. Captain Brightnote, now commanding a Singer warship, appeared on screen. "My species has composed something for this battle. May we share it with the fleet?" "Of course, Captain." What followed was unlike anything heard before in the galaxy. It was a song, but not the pure harmonies the singers were known for. This was music that incorporated the rough voices of human Marines, the mathematical precision of architect communications, even the rustling sounds of gardener speech. It was the sound of unity. Different species, different voices, but all singing the same song of defiance. "That's beautiful," whispered Dr. Willowbranch from her station on a Federation vessel. "That's a war song," replied her human counterpart, Lieutenant Morrison. "And it's about to get a lot louder." The first wave of swarm ships reached the outer system and immediately faced something they had never encountered before. The Federation fleet didn't run. Instead, they formed up with the human vessels and charged straight into the enemy formation. What followed was the largest space battle in galactic history. 15,000 swarm vessels against 400 allied ships with the fate of civilization hanging in the balance. The swarm had numbers. The allies had something better. They had learned to fight like humans while keeping their own unique strengths. Gaseous drifters flowed through space to provide perfect reconnaissance. Crystal architects created geometric formations that maximized defensive fire. Gardener vessels used their biotechnology to repair battle damage on the fly. And through it all, the singers maintained the war song that kept every ship in perfect coordination. But numbers began to tell. One by one, allied ships were destroyed or disabled. The defensive grid around Terra Nova started to buckle under the assault. That's when the second phase of the battle began. All orbital platforms. "Commence planetary defense fire," ordered Coordinator Jackson. The surface of Terra Nova lit up like a star. Weapons that had been hidden in gardens and parks. Gun emplacements disguised as sculptures. Missile batteries built into children's playgrounds. All of them opened fire simultaneously. The swarm had expected to face a few orbital defense platforms. Instead, they found an entire planet that had been turned into a fortress without losing its beauty. "How is this possible?" demanded the swarm's lead bioship, speaking for the first time in the war. "This world shows no signs of militarization. That's because you don't understand humans, replied Sarah over the open channel. We don't militarize our homes. We just make sure our homes can fight when they have to. The battle raged for 18 hours. Swarm ships crashed into the planet's surface, only to be met by civilian defense forces armed with military weapons and protected by Federation shields. Human families fought alongside alien neighbors, protecting children who weren't even their own species. It was during the final assault that the moment came that would be remembered forever. A group of swarm bioships broke through the orbital defenses and headed straight for New Geneva, Terra Nova's capital city. The city's shields were failing and there were no ships in position to intercept. That's when the children stepped up. This is Sarah Martinez, age 12, calling from Emergency Shelter 7, came a young voice over the communication networks. We see the bad ships coming toward the city. The grown-ups are all busy fighting, so we kids got together and figured out how to use the emergency beacon system. Sarah, get back in the shelter, ordered someone in the background. Can't do that, Mom, the girl replied calmly. We've got the beacon network set up to guide the orbital defense satellites. If we don't do this, the bad ships will get through. Across the planet, children's voices joined the communication network. Human kids working with young aliens using emergency systems to coordinate the planet's final defense. Emergency shelter. 2 online, came another young voice. Tommy Chen here. We've got targeting data for Sector 7. Shelter 12 ready, added a third voice, this one with the musical tones of a young singer. Melody Child Swiftnote reporting. We can see 3 big ships coming in low. What followed was the most sophisticated defensive coordination ever achieved. Children who had grown up playing with both human technology and alien sciences used emergency beacon networks to guide orbital weapons with pinpoint accuracy. The attacking swarm ships were destroyed, less than 50 kilometers from the city. When the last swarm vessel was finally destroyed, the silence that followed was deafening. Then slowly voices began to join the communication networks. Terra Nova Defense, this is UES Intrepid. We're still here. Crystalline Tower 7 reporting. Minimal damage, ready for further orders. Singer Warship Harmony calling. We're a bit singed, but still singing. One by one, the survivors checked in. The Allied fleet had been reduced to less than 100 operational ships. The planet's defenses were in ruins, but they had won. The Void Swarm was broken. Their fleet destroyed, their leadership dead. Their ability to threaten the galaxy ended forever. Admiral Chen, came a transmission from the Federation Council. Preliminary reports indicate total strategic victory. The swarm threat has been eliminated. Sarah nodded, then opened a channel to the entire system. All ships, all stations, all planetary forces, she announced. The war is over. We won. The celebration that followed lasted for 3 days. Ships from across the galaxy arrived to join the victory ceremonies. The children who had coordinated the final defense were honored as heroes. The mixed crews that had fought together were welcomed as the beginning of a new era. But it was the quiet conversation between Sarah and High Counselor Veiltar that defined what came next. What happens now? Veiltar asked as they stood watching human and alien children playing together in the ruins of what had been a battlefield. Now, we build something better, Sarah replied. Your people know how to create beauty and peace. My people know how to protect it. Together, maybe we can build a galaxy worth living in. And the weapons, the warships, the knowledge of violence we've all gained,